I'm Jordan Albertsen, the director of Boom, a film about the Sonics, and this is The State of Love and Trust.
Welcome to another episode of The State of Love and Trust. It's a Pearl Jam podcast. I'm one of your two hosts, Jason Kerepesi, and alongside me, as always, is
Paul Ghiglieri.
Paul. It is, what is this, December 10th, I want to say? It is the middle of December. We are closing in on the end of the year. Have you gotten your Spotify Wrapped, your Apple Music Wrapped? Do you know how much time you spent listening to Pearl Jam?
Lots. I'm wearing Pearl Jam. That's how much time I spent listening to Pearl Jam.
You know what's funny is the people over the last week have been putting out their Wrapped or their Apple Music review highlights, whatever. And it's like, I don't need that thing to tell me that I am a sick person who listens to far too much Pearl Jam.
Touche.
Algorithms.
Know thyself, said Emerson.
If you're watching on the YouTube, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications. And if you're listening only, Paul, what should they be doing?
They should be rating, reviewing, and subscribing on their preferred podcast platform of choice. Feed that algorithm the way we feed carrots to reindeer so Santa can bring you joy. In this case, let us bring you joy.
I thought you were going to make an Abominable Snowman reference.
That's coming.
Is that next week?
That's
okay. Well, like I said, it is December, which means a new fundraiser, a new nonprofit to support. And this month we are going with Toys for Tots. We are here to make some kids' Christmases and Hanukkahs much, much brighter. And we would appreciate it if you go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen right now, or head to tap that little link in the bio of our Instagram and donate to that fine organization. And if you send $5 or more, you will receive the old stickers and pins.
Stickers. Who wants some stickers?
There we go. And as I said last week, the greatest donator, the biggest donation, will receive an Eddie Vedder mystery pack. Maybe there's some shirts, maybe there's some stickers. Who knows what's in there? Mystery. I don't know what that was. That was like Wayne's World. That's what that was.
Exactly.
So that'll be sent.
Camera 2. Camera 1. Camera 2.
Gratuitous sex scene. No. What's happening right now? I don't know.
What's happening? So, we're off the rails. We haven't even started. Okay.
That's true. It is Eddie Vedder's birthday month, so why not an Eddie Vedder mystery pack to the greatest donator to Toys for Tots? Do it. Donate.
Be that person.
Be the. I was gonna make a Michael Jackson reference, and it wasn't gonna make any sense. But it made sense in my head at first, and then it didn't make any sense, and so I stopped myself. But I'm telling you about it, so I've already had a beer. Leave me alone. It was a solstice, if you're asking. Yes.
They look like these. You should have one too.
There you go. Now, if you want to support this show, if you think we do a nice job, if you want to say thank you to us, which we would happily take, there is Patreon. We got a great community over there where we're always talking on the Discord, and we've got lots of cool videos and extra audio stuff for you over there. And there is, Paul, a giveaway every single month. You know about this?
I have heard.
You've heard the rumblings. Well, this month, a random patron will receive this. This is
it's a winner.
The Record Store Day 12-inch single of Live Waiting for Stevie and Live Wreckage. Got this at Amoeba here in Hollywood. This could be yours. And you know what? We'll throw in a Dark Matter slip mat just for funsies.
Just for funsies.
Just for funsies. That could be yours.
Infidelity to fidelity. Put that slip mat on.
A random patron will receive that in the month of December. So Merry Christmas to you, if that is you, in the future. Yeah, exactly. Last bit of news. We have a brand new online store, Paul. That's a really fun way to support the show.
Oh, boy.
We got t-shirts, new designs, old designs. We got mugs and pint glasses, and there's what else? There's a flag. There's a flag on there.
We don't have toys for tots, but we have clothes for tots.
We do. We have clothes for tots. We got clothes for teenagers and kids.
So excited.
That's true. I couldn't believe that was an option. Kids supporting the show.
Yeah.
I know I'm mindlessly shilling here, but I'm really excited genuinely that these are things that we can do.
It's fun.
So if you want to support the show and have a piece of cool merch, go ahead and scan the QR code that you just saw or the link in the description of this thing. And, there you go. That's all there is. So, all right, this week we've got a guest who has taken a story that needed to be told and has told it and somehow found another story while making it. And it's incredible. And I know that we all love certain bands. And when we listen to music in our preteen years and our teenage years, those are the bands that stick with us, right, Paul?
Yep.
And those bands, they are influenced by other bands. Sometimes we've never heard of those bands. Well, one of those bands that influenced people like Kim Thayil of Soundgarden, Nancy Wilson, Mark Arm of Mudhoney, and Mike McCready of Pearl Jam, they heard a band called the Sonics way after they were popular. And there's a documentary all about that. And it's by a man named Jordan Albertsen, and he joins us next. He's a writer, director, and filmmaker from Seattle. His feature-length debut is a fantastic documentary detailing the unique rise, fall, and comeback of the Sonics, one of the original punk bands from Tacoma, Washington, by the way. It's called Boom. Welcome to the show, Jordan Albertsen.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you.
So you were telling me before we got started that you're from Seattle, but then you weren't. You were down here in LA, and then you were in Montana, of all places. Now you're back in the Seattle area. Like, why are we moving around?
Oh, man. Well, luckily that all sort of has to do with the making of the movie, so I might as well just kind of jump into it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Northwest, so I'm from Whidbey Island, which is about 50 miles north of Seattle. And, always wanted to get into film. And, once I graduated high school, I packed up and went to LA because that's what you do. So I went down there and got into PAing, and then I started directing music videos and some short films and started up a couple production companies. And, things kind of started like that. I was in my 20s and, like things would be really good and then they'd be bad and I'd have to move back home and live in my dad's basement. And then all of a sudden it'd be like, hey, going back to LA, getting something going. And it was like, kind of the up and down of all of that. And there was a point when it was in 2008. That's when I started to make this film. I was living in LA. I was actually sleeping on couches and out in Playa del Rey. And one of my good friends, a guy named Tom, who's actually like the world's biggest Pearl Jam fan, which is so appropriate for this. Yeah, Tom, what's up? Tom Mahler. Anytime Pearl Jam announces a tour, that's the only time him and I ever talk, and it's like, all right, which one are we? But yeah, I was crashing on sleeping on his couch, and the Sonics announced a tour, and they were going to play this hometown show in Seattle, and that was, as stated in the film, that was kind of when my dad and I went to that show, but Tom came up with me, and it was that night that I decided to start, working on the film and making the film, and that started this whole crazy journey here for me.
Man, okay. Let's go backwards before we can go forwards.
It's dense.
No, it's great. It's great because it's kind of like, now I get to do a little prequel. Like, sure. We are all basically the same age, right? And you being from Seattle, growing up in Seattle, talk about how your entry point into music was and how growing up inside of like basically ground zero for grunge, how that affected you in your musical upbringing.
Well, huge. I mean, it was, when I was like a little young, so I wasn't able to go and see all the, Nirvana and all these bands that, when they were playing those shows, I was probably 12, 13, 14, right around when that was going on. But I was, obsessed with music, and growing up, it was, movies and music. I wanted to make movies and I wanted to listen to music, and I was a huge punk rock fan, and I was definitely kind of a handful, I think, as a kid. So I had long hair, and, I was pretty difficult. Now that I've got two sons, I understand that car is a real thing. And my father and I, we really weren't very close. My dad was a pretty big nerd. That's how I looked at him. He was kind of a nerd. He didn't really talk about music. He didn't seem to really know anything about music. And so I just, and we just didn't have any common ground that I thought. When I'd get in my dad's truck, the only tape that he had in his truck was Dire Straits. And I hated Dire Straits. Couldn't stand it. I wanted to listen.
Mark Knopfler for you.
No.
Guy's talented. I just couldn't do it. As a 11, 12-year-old, I wanted punk rock music. I was a huge, Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam and everything, and Soundgarden. And there was this thing that happened with my father where he walked by my bedroom one day, and I was listening to Nirvana, and I had it cranked up, and he stopped in my doorway and he said, "If you like this, you should check out the Sonics." And I remember I kind of stopped and I looked at him, and I'll never forget. I must have given him just like like a whatever, Dad. And I thought he was talking about the basketball team. I had no idea what he was talking about, and he just kept walking, and I was like, "Oh, that was weird. What the hell was my dad talking about?" And a couple of days later, I'd come home from school, and my dad found a copy of Boom, and he left it against my door in my bedroom. And I went into my room and played the album, and it completely blew my mind. As a 11, 12-year-old kid, I thought I knew everything there was to know about everything, and I thought I knew everything.
You had a record player in your room?
It was actually a CD. It was a CD.
I was going to say.
But I did have a little record collection.
That's awesome.
But the actual record player came later. But in the film, I show a record, but it was actually a CD. And he also found a Whalers CD at that same. It was a used CD store he went to and found.
Fantastic.
So the Whalers came next, very quickly afterwards, because after I heard Boom, it was the first song, I just like, you put that album on, and the beginning of Cinderella, like you can hear that guitar warming up, and I remember just like, what? It was just this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and then the fact that my dad was the one,
the square,
like who are you?
Dude, and I mean,
look at Batman?
It's like the mid 60s. And, when you learn about punk rock music, it's like you read all the books, Please Kill Me and everything. And it's like everything kind of like stops at the Stooges, right? And here's my dad, this guy that knows, nothing about anything. And he's just like drops this like punk rock knowledge bomb like in my little brain. And it blew my mind. And so I went downstairs and I was like, what like, Dad, what the fuck is this? Like, what is this? And he's like, oh yeah, it's like when I was in college, I used to go see those guys. They'd play like bowling alleys and stuff. And he's like, yeah, they were
stories, Dad, stories.
Yeah, and I was like, and then he started telling me about the Spanish Castle and and you'd go to these shows, and so all of a sudden I was like, well, I thought you didn't know anything about music, and he's like, yeah, I kind of stopped listening to music like right around 1970. When he started his career, went to the Navy, and he like literally like, I introduced my dad to Black Sabbath and AC/DC. Like my dad, honestly, didn't know about those guys.
Just missed the whole decade.
Missed that whole decade, and really the decades kind of after that, until him and I started hanging out and sharing music. But he, so I asked him, I was like, okay, well, who else did you see back in the 60s? He's like, I never went to that many concerts, but I did go to a few. I saw Jimi Hendrix. I saw the Beatles, And he just starts telling me, he's like, yeah, I went and saw Beach Boys on their Pet Sounds tour. Like he just starts laying it out.
Iconic.
Yeah, like he went to like 5.
You guys just dropping $100 bills and mic drops all over the place.
Totally. And that was how my father was, and later on in my life, not long after that, there were a lot of movies and I learned that he was this huge cinephile. And so anyway, so that was how him and I bonded, and that was why I knew of the Sonics, and I honestly hadn't heard anyone else really talk about them until that reunion. So for years, it was just this band that my dad and I bonded over, and it was this special thing. So when I had heard that they were that they were reuniting and playing shows, we had to go, and I called my father up, and I was like, the Sonics have reunited. They're playing Seattle. Like, I'm flying up. We are going to the show. And him and I had never been to a concert together, and we went to that show, and it was just incredible. And it was, so that's kind of my background on how my father and I, to answer your question, a very long answer.
Well, I gotta ask you, you said that your dad was a cinephile. Like, how did this passion for filmmaking emerge in you?
It actually came at a real young age. I was around 4, and I always liked, movies. Was as a little kid, like every little kid likes monitors. Anything with a screen that lights up. But
we all know this now.
Now as fathers, we're all very thankful of that break that we get from time to time. But my mom was actually the one. She had a friend that worked at this Sears like appliance store, and I went with my mom to go visit her friend. And I was just like, no, I want to go. And she's like trying to have this conversation with her friend. And back in the 80s, when a movie would come out and it was called sell through, they would sell them at store. Like now, everywhere you go, there's movies always for sale or whatever. But back then it was kind of a big deal. Like if a new movie came out and it was for sale, it was called sell through, because normally they would cost like $100 and video stores would get them. But anyway, E.T. had just come out, and it was its first VHS release, and there was a display of E.T. VHS movies. I hadn't even really heard of it because I was 4, but I just saw that it was a thing for sale, and it was clearly something that I was into more than the refrigerators that was on sale. So I threw this like shit fit in Sears and kicking and screaming like, Mom, I want you to buy me this movie. And it was like $40, which is like a lot of money in the 80s.
VHS, right?
Yeah. And my family like did not have money. So it wasn't like, my parents weren't just buying me stuff all the time. But I threw such a fit that my mom was like, shut you up. I'm going to buy you E.T. And she took me home after that, and she put me in front of the TV, and she was like, here's your movie, and put on E.T. And the end of that movie rolls, and I'm bawling, crying. And my mom, I remember she's like in the kitchen trying to make dinner for my sister and I. And she's like, oh, this is Daddy's crying. Like, I'm never fucking showing him another goddamn movie.
It's a good cry.
Yeah. But so I was crying, and it kind of like occurred to me in like a 4-year-old way that like, wait a minute, I just sat and like watched a movie, like, and so I went to my mom and I was like, wait a minute, like, how did this get, like, who made this? And she was like, well, Steven Spielberg. And I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to be Steven Spielberg. And she was like, cool. Man. Like tomorrow I'll be a cop or a firefighter.
Eat your mac and cheese.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Whatever, kid. And it never changed. And once I got to read and I saw that he was the director of that movie, I just kept telling her, oh, I'm going to be a director when I grow up. And so that was really the beginning of my like love for movies. And man, it went deep. I mean, I was watching Truffaut and Fellini movies when I was like in middle school.
And so Antonioni, the Alienation trilogy, La Notte, La Aventura. We could go all day, buddy.
Yeah. I was like deep into the Criterion collection as like a 13.
That's what it was.
and my dad, to kind of bridge the two, we didn't have like a big video store on the island. It was always like the video department in the grocery store. And my dad was a grocery man. So we would always go to this grocery store called Casey's that he was the manager of. And I would be excited to go because I could just go to the video department and just like look at boxes, which was like my favorite thing. And I was always as a young kid, you want to look at the horror movies, right? So I was always looking at the sci-fi horror shit. And, anything I would ask my mom to rent me and she said no, I would wait till she was gone and then I'd go ask my dad. And the biggest no I ever got, I'll never forget it. There was a box for A Clockwork Orange, and as a kid, it looks really attractive. It's the cartoon with the dagger and the eyeball and all that. So I grabbed it and I went up to my mom and I was like, "Can you rent this for me?" And she was like, like true, like
the pearls.
Yeah, like that. And I was like, "Ooh, this must be real fucked up." I gotta ask my dad to rent me this. And I asked my dad, I was like, "Hey, can you rent me A Clockwork Orange?" And he was like, "No." And that was when I was like, "Holy shit, I gotta, this thing must be great." And so I made this deal with him. And he eventually did show me A Clockwork Orange, but he refused to just show me that movie. He rented The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
You just leaned into Kubrick. It's like, we're just going to do
like,
this.
Hey, if we're going to be a bear, we're going to be a grizzly.
Yeah. Well, his whole thing was, if you're, I get, as a kid, you want to see this movie because mom said no, and you think there's going to be nudity and all sorts of crazy shit in it. But my dad was like, "I want you to learn about this guy because I have a feeling you'll become obsessed with him." Sure enough, I did.
Dad was playing the long game.
Yeah, and that's how he was. He kind of had this. He was especially looking in my father passed away a couple of years ago. So I've had there's been a lot of time to really think about it and how sort of quietly, like almost stealthily influential he was in my life. But yeah, introducing me to the Sonics was huge.
So you're out there at the Casey's and you're trying to manipulate your parents into getting VHS copies you shouldn't be getting VHS copies of, and you're listening to the Seattle scene music, and you're growing up in Seattle, and it's during a time that the teen dance ordinance was still in effect, right? Remember that thing? So I spoke to Mark Arm last year, and we talked about this kind of at length, and kind of how his bands circumnavigated that. Early in this film, Boom, you talk about Little Bill and the Blue Notes and how, or I guess the gentleman from Sonics did, and Buck, they threw their own sock hops, their own gigs. And this predates the ordinance, which started in 85. Did you talk to the band kind of about that do-it-yourself mentality and how it spanned generations?
A little bit more Buck, because Buck was really like the business guy.
Mm-hmm.
The guys in the Sonics, I think, were all just trying to get laid. I really think like they out, and again, you got to remember too, they were like 19, like they were, I mean, what else are you thinking about that age? But Buck, he was always trying to figure out how to, get things going. And that was something he was like 14 when he was in Little Bill and the Blue Notes. And it was his idea, I think, to go outside of city limits because he knew he could charge more money and the cops wouldn't show up. And, he told me some just amazing stories too, because there was a thing in the city of Seattle where African Americans weren't allowed to be business owners. So south of Seattle along 99, because there was right outside city limits, all these African-American bars started opening up. And that was where this like sort of, black scene kind of started south of Seattle. And so that was where, Chuck Berry and Little Richard and all these guys, when they'd come through town, that's where they'd play these little bars. And Buck was like, and these were 21 and over bars. And Buck told me these stories. He's like, yeah, so I would just like sneak out of my house. We'd steal somebody's car and he'd go, and he befriended the door guys. And so they'd let 13, 14-year-old Buck and his friends in on the side. And he would just like lean against the rail. And that was the thing. He had to promise he wouldn't like, mingle or whatever. Sure. But he would like lean against the rail and he watched these guys play. And so that's how a lot of those guys in Tacoma learned how to play that stuff, especially like the guys in the Whalers. So they were so influenced by those bands, because like we know of obviously the Little Richard, but they all had these really incredible band members, and they would play for like 6 hours. And Buck would just like, that was how he learned how to play bass, and that was where he really learned that rhythm.
Speaking of nefarious activity in Seattle. What do you make of the revelation that the Sonic song "The Witch" actually charted #1, but then got bumped to 2 because KJR, the radio station at the time, they just wouldn't allow devil music to be #1?
Well, I mean, a couple things. One, I don't think the guys in the Sonics gave a shit at the time. I think I think it was, but to find out later on, it was just another one of those. Here, I'll go back. So one thing you got to know about the guys in the Sonics is, like, when that band broke up, they forgot about it. Like, they left it behind. So, like, they didn't care. Like, none of them continued on with the music. Like, none of them looked back on their glory days, and none of them really understand. And I think even to this day, really understand how unique and special and, like, perfect storm that thing was that they did, and then how much it means to people. I mean, it took forever for me to just get them to understand why I was spending such a huge chunk of my life trying to make this movie about them. I mean,
do they get it now?
I think like a little bit. Like, they definitely get bits and pieces of it, but I still don't think fully. And it's different for each individual member. I think Rob Lind is definitely, probably the most aware and keen to it. But, Jerry's really private, and a lot of these guys aren't really wanting to kind of go out and talk about this stuff really much anymore. So to get back to your kind of question, what did they say about it? Not much. I think Rob was the one that brought it up, and he was like, that was kind of cool. If anything, it probably made them feel even more badass or something to their grandkids. But yeah,
their music was so hardcore that they had to get bumped down because of the puritanical bosses.
Yeah, totally. There's so much of it. I guess that was one thing when I finally did get to know them. It was pretty profound to think about. Like, imagine if you did this thing when you were like 18, 19 years old, and then just kind of like left it behind and moved on. And then 50 years later, all these people are telling you that this little thing that you did that you've kind of forgotten about changed their life and possibly, historically changed pop culture. Like, what are you supposed to do with that? I don't know what I would do with that. Like, I would be probably deer in headlights and never really know how to, take it in. And that, I think, was something that once I realized that was kind of the situation with these guys, I reacted a lot differently, and I was certainly making a much different film at that point. But
it's interesting how you start a film, and then as you get deeper into the creation of this project, it starts taking on a life of its own, right?
Well, this one is, I mean, just to give you an idea, like when I first jumped into this thing, I was 25. I'm in my 40s now, and my assumption was like, oh, I'll just go back to LA and get like $1 million. I just signed with a big agency, and I was like, oh, this is, I'll go down there and
just
tell
my, it's low budget.
Yeah. Like, I need, hey, go get me $1 million, like, what, right? Isn't that what we do? He was just like, what? No, like, we don't, that's not how this works. Like, I've never heard of the Sonics. How am I supposed to raise money for this? Like, you got to go do a Justin Bieber doc or something if you want that kind of money. And I was like, who the fuck is Justin Bieber? Like, I just was like, I was so mystified, because the movie I wanted to make originally was completely different. I had this kind of grand Fincher-esque kind of visual cinematic thing that I was going to do, where I was going to just interview the guys and have this big sort of retelling of their history visually, because I knew there wasn't a lot of any footage that existed of them back in the day. So that was my approach originally, and that's why I wanted to, that's why it was going to be so expensive. But the money never came. I spent 5 years trying to raise money, and it was just like dead end after dead end after dead end. And as that process was going on, I had a number of other movies that were, in Hollywood and kind of like close to happening, and it like all sort of fell apart. And it was right around that time I did an Indiegogo campaign. So I was like, oh, this is a thing now. Like people are doing these Kickstarter.
Crowdsourcing, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, this will for sure. So I spent like a year putting together this Indiegogo campaign. And when that launched, it just bombed. It made like, I was hoping to get, $500,000. We made 11. And I think half of that came from my dad. And like when that happened, it was just like, clearly this movie is dead. There's nothing I can do. And Buck and I were the ones that we would just keep talking to each other and trying to kind of pump each other up like, hey, we'll make this, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to keep doing, I'm going to make it happen. And there was a point when I noticed, so I could hear something in it didn't sound very good. And I was like, God, Buck, maybe I should come up to Seattle and shoot your interview. Buck was like, I think that's a good idea. And he wasn't being real forthcoming with me, but I could tell he wasn't healthy and something
right.
going on with him. So I went up to Seattle or to Tacoma, and I spent 2 days filming this interview with Buck. And that was when I learned about what he had done. I didn't know that before.
I mean, this is wild. This renaissance that he basically personally made happen for them.
It's crazy.
The way that he was able to revive them in a way through Europe, which is like the second act of your film, because like you said, you were going into it. We'll just honor what their story was, but you didn't know about this part.
I had no idea. No, I had no idea. And so so I filmed this interview with him, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, this is a crazy story. And I still didn't have financing. There still wasn't a movie, but I did have that interview. And so a couple more years went by, and Buck and I kept, oh yeah, we're going to make this movie. And then all these other movies I had fell apart. My whole life kind of fell apart when I was in LA, and I was living with my girlfriend, Sasha, who I'm now married to, and we have 2 kids. But we made this decision to move out of LA because I was so broke, and I couldn't get a job at a restaurant, a grocery store. My bank account was in the negative, and her parents had this house in Bozeman, Montana that we could live in for free. And she had a friend that managed a sushi restaurant out there. And she was just like, hey, this is a lifeline. I don't know. What do you think? And I was like, I've never been to Montana. I give up. Like, let's go. And so that was kind of it. Like that was the end of that was certainly the end of Boom. But I was giving up on movies, and it was like right around that time, Buck passed away. And so I was like it was like the final gut punch. Him and I were really close, and it broke my heart, and I was embarrassed and ashamed, and I felt like I let him down. And now I'm moving to Montana to work at a sushi restaurant. I was just like, holy fucking shit. Like, this is the end of everything. Like, everything I'd been working toward was gone and crushed. And so this is probably like 7-8 years into the process of like trying to make this movie. And so we move out to Montana, and I get this job at a place. It's, like I said, a sushi restaurant. And, I became a host there, and they put me up there because I was just like this grumpy, like hard, fucking didn't give a shit. Like, and it was this, young college town. It was a really popular restaurant. So you had to be just like a fucking stone-faced killer up there at the host stand. They were like, let's put this Jordan dude up there.
You can't walk in for $5. Come on, man.
Dude, exactly. So they put me up there, and I never talked about my history of film. No one really knew any of that. I made, friends in town, but I honestly didn't even talk about any of it because it was kind of embarrassing. I just felt like this huge failure. And about 6 months into that job, there's this one night, and it's this crazy busy night. We're on like a 2-hour wait. The whole parking lot is filled with these drunk college cowboys and fucking shithead kids. And I get this phone call, and it's this woman, and she's like, hey, so I've just been driving for 10 hours. I've got 12 people. I got these kids with me. Everybody's grumpy. Is there any way I could get a table of 12 in like 5 minutes? And I was just like, oh my God, like no fucking way.
What?
And I look out into the parking lot, and I look at all these like dickheads that have been giving me shit all night. And it's the only time I ever did this. I sat there and I was like, you know what? I'm going to look at this mom with this ridiculously large family into this restaurant. Fuck these cowboys. Like, fuck these college kids. I'm going to get this fucking mom in here.
That's the name of the episode. Fuck these guys.
Yeah, and this is where the karma pays off.
Yeah, right. So I get back on the phone and I'm like, hey, what's your name? She goes, Ashley. I go, Ashley, come in and ask for Jordan. I'm gonna hook you up. So a few minutes later, she comes in and she's got these 2 kids hanging off her arms, and I'm like, Ashley? And she goes, yeah. And I was like, give me like 2 more minutes. I'm just putting that together. She goes, dude, you are a lifesaver. I'm like, don't even fucking worry about it. I'm gonna come get you. So I get the table together and I walk out into the parking lot and I see Ashley and she's with this crowd and she's standing next to her husband and he has his back to me. And I recognized him instantly.
Wait a minute.
So
you said Ashley, right?
I did. Yeah. So
I think I know who the person is.
Right. So like I said, I could tell who he was from behind because I had posters of fucking Pearl Jam and shit all over my wall as a kid, and I still do because I'm still a huge fan, and I go see him every time I can, and he turns around and it's Mike McCready, and I'll never forget it. I kind of stood there, and I was stunned, and I go, "You're fucking Mike McCready," and he goes, "Yeah," and I was like, "Did I say that out loud?" And he goes, "Yeah," and I was like, I've been trying to get in touch with you for 10 years. I'm making a movie about the Sonics. And I just came at him. Fucking
you vomited.
But dude, vomited. That's what I vomited this pitch at him. He goes, I'm in. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, man, I'm in. This sounds killer. And I was like, cool. Let me get you to your table. And we like walked to the restaurant.
This is outstanding.
And I'm like instantly just fucking sweating, because now all of a sudden, I'm making a movie. I'm not making a movie about the Sonics. This shit fell apart, But here I am with the guitarist of Pearl Jam, and he's all of a sudden attached to my, he's like, let's do it. So they sit down and they're like super thankful, and I'm like, yeah, no, crazy for sure. And he keeps calling me over to the table.
More breadsticks over here.
Yeah, right? But he keeps calling me over, and he's like, I want to know more about this thing. So I keep kind of telling him more and more, and he eventually pulls out his phone and he goes, okay, well, who else do you need? And he fucking texts everybody you see in the movie. And
Nancy, Mark,
dude,
can't
yeah, and like it. I can't even describe like how life-changing that moment is, because it wasn't like all of a sudden we had money to make the movie, because to be honest, we never got money. I actually just made most of the money came out of the tips I made working at a sushi restaurant in Montana, but I just made it anyway.
Jordan, what Ashley said you were that night for her, she ultimately was for you then. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like this perfect intersection of needs and just you doing the right thing for the right person at the right time. And wow, unbelievable.
Yeah. It was crazy, man. And if I'm being really honest, I was like suicidal, like that probably saved my life, and because all of a sudden it was like, there's a surge back into this. Yeah, totally. It validated everything, because all of a sudden because dude, I probably wrote 5,000 emails trying to get all these people. Because once Buck passed away, he was really my connection to all the rock stars. And when he passed away, I mean, dude, it was like, who the hell was I to reach out to these guys, So this encounter, it changed everything. Probably saved my life. And so all of a sudden it was like, fuck it, we're back on. I'm making this movie. And I remember calling Chris, my cinematographer, and I'm like, hey man, I got McCready. I got like all these guys lined up. We're gonna come out.
He was like, what now?
He's like, no way. Like, cool, what's our budget? I'm like, yeah, about that.
About $37.50.
Yeah, like
that was my tip.
Yeah, like, can you steal some of the, like, are you shooting any commercials around that time, in September? Maybe we could throw that shit in a van and roll out to Seattle and borrow it for a weekend. And so that was honestly what I did. I
punk rock filmmaking, Jordan.
Yeah. And
you just jacked a bunch of equipment from
Yeah.
I'm going to buy this red camera, Best Buy or B&H, and I'm not going to return it.
Well, that was the other thing too, is that I refuse, that was like, once I knew that the movie I wanted to make was dead, like that was dead. And I was like, well, I'm just going to make a film about the Sonics. Like, I don't know what the fuck it is. I'm just going to start getting these interviews. I'm going to start piecing something together. I knew something was crazy with this Buck story. And then once I, shot those interviews with like Mike and Mark and this other story and Nancy Wilson, this other story started to come together. I was like, oh my God. And I could see what Buck had done and how that had like this trickle effect in it. And so I was just sort of following this narrative that was just kind of laid out in front of me. And, I never was going to narrate the movie, and I was never going to put myself in the film, and if you ever get to know me, I don't like being on camera. I don't particularly like the sound of my voice. I don't ever want to be in a movie again. But, fucking Dave Grohl wasn't responding to my fucking emails. So like, I as I was editing the movie, I knew I had to kind of put something in there. Yeah, stitch something together. So to me, it was just kind of like I was putting these little, just kind of little placeholders in there. And one of my best friends, a guy named Mike Evans, him and I had a conversation that always stuck with me. We stayed up late one night listening to records, and obviously the Sonics got brought up. And I remember him asking me, he's like, man, why are you doing this? He's like, you are like killing yourself to make this movie. And he's like, no one's helping you. No one's giving you any money. You're not getting paid. And by the time this movie if this ever gets made, he's like, I'm sure you're not going to make any fucking money. He's like, why are you doing this? And I had never even thought about that. And I really didn't. I was like, man, fuck, I don't know. And he goes, well, like, how did you learn about the Sonics? And I told him that story about my dad. And I remember looking over at him, and he was like, it made him really emotional. And Mike is a filmmaker and a writer, and he's a really talented guy. And he looked over at me and he was like, you need to put that in the movie. And I remember going, fuck no, I'm not putting that in the movie. Like, no way. But it kind of stuck with me, and I knew that I wanted like a way in for an audience that weren't particularly Sonics fans. I wanted to make a movie that people who don't know the band could find like a way in on. And so I started kind of playing around with it. And I mean, man, it was something I wasn't particularly excited about, but I sent a really early cut of the film to another friend of mine, a guy named Scott Mosier, who was a producer on a band called Death. And he's also produced all of Kevin Smith's early films. He produced Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, and he edited those. And him and Kevin were like, very close friends. And I got to meet Scott when I was in high school, and he was like this hero of mine. And as I got older, he was always one of those people that I stayed in touch with through email, and he was always kind enough to just kind of respond to my emails. You know what I mean? That's not like a close friend, but he was like a sweet guy that always kind of was willing to give me advice and respond. So at one point I was so kind of blinded by it because I had just been trying to cut this thing together, and I had no idea what I was even looking at anymore because I was making it in this like vacuum, and I could only drag my wife into the nursery was where I edited the thing, and ask her to look at so many scenes before she's just like, it's great, like whatever. So I sent this really, really early cut to Scott in hopes that he might give me some, because I knew he'd give me like brutal notes. And he wrote me back and he was like, man, this is really good. And he was like, and we got on the phone and he told me, he's like, man, I really like you narrating this thing. And I remember thinking like, oh, fuck.
Damn it.
I guess I got to do that. So that was how that bit kind of got folded into it.
Well, listen, I mean, one thing that I told you at the very beginning, I think actually off air, that the one thing I noticed early on when you talked about the record your dad put down on the door for you, or the CD for you to listen to the Sonics, I go, oh, this is going to bookend somehow. How is this going to bookend? And I think, this film, I think it illustrates something that our listeners, primarily Pearl Jam fans, will absolutely be able to access and appreciate. And that's that music builds these bridges, right? It builds connections amongst people. And for you, it was your dad. Why do you think music can do this, can build these connections?
Well, because it's like a universal language that doesn't have any biases. It's like this thing, and you guys being Pearl Jam fans will know this. Like, you get into a room with a bunch of strangers, and when you go to a concert and it's really good, there's this thing that can happen, and it just this magic. And you could be standing next to some gigantic asshole, and next thing you got your arms around each other, and you are just in this moment because it is so infectious and it is so magical, and it's like you are there in that moment right now. It's never going to happen again. How fucking lucky are you? And it's like when you feel that and you have that moment that happens, it's just, it doesn't matter your fucking political views. It doesn't matter, your religion or anything. Like if you allow yourself to just give in to a moment like that, it is so special and so magical. And I'm lucky to have been to enough concerts where I've had that moment. And I always tell people I'm chasing the dragon because I'm constantly going to concerts, because it is such a magical thing that really it just brings people together. And there, when I started to learn about the history of the Sonics, it was like, well, obviously my father introduced me to these guys, but then I started to just see how this band had kind of trickled out into the world and been this like, powerful engine for all these other musicians and other artists. And what was so crazy about the Sonics is that they had no idea that was happening, where most bands know, because they get to sort of, take in all that adoration. But for them, it was happening without their knowledge. And
you've got Buck, basically the George Martin of the whole thing, just yanking them. You need to learn. I mean, flying to Europe every summer for 6 years. And then that renaissance, and then you got people like him and Mark and Mike and Nancy being like, yeah. Like, is that a mind fuck?
Totally. Yeah, but that I even feel like there's some, like, I could have like tried to dig deeper into what that is, but it was almost like I didn't want to, because it's like you don't want to fuck it up, And if you've ever experienced that, what I'm talking about, it's like you can't really I don't know, you can't really like define it. And obviously Chris Ballou, he got into it, and he got pretty philosophical, kind of, his experience as a musician feeling that. And I remember him describing that, and I was like, God, that is just so, I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like on stage. Like when you're, and I asked Mike that because, he's McCready, not in the film, but off camera. I was asking him one time, like, what the fuck is that like? Like, what is that like? I mean, I know that there's got to be a point when you're in a band, like when you go to do it over and over and over again, there's got to be moments where, you are sort of like this muscle memory thing. But I remember he told me, he's just like, man, it's crazy. Like, he was just like, dude, it's fucking crazy. You open your eyes, you look out into a crowd of 60,000, 80,000 people, and they're singing your songs. It's unreal. And that thing that kind of had back and forth that happens from the stage to the crowd. It's just,
and the guys finally got that again in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
Jordan. No, go ahead. Finish your thought, please.
Oh, I was gonna. There's this funny story that I always think about when I'm thinking about the band, and because I got to be on stage with them and film them and stuff. And there was this show in Germany, in Cologne, where I was with them on stage, and this guy got naked and started streaking through the crowd and like knocking over his beers, and like got the shit kicked out of him by security. And I remember Larry kind of looked over at me and he gave me this look like, this is horrible. And I was like, this is fucking great.
This is great.
This is great. And he looks out on the crowd and some girl took her top off, and it was just one of these like what and
he's 70 years old.
Yeah, and and you could tell that he was just like on the verge of a panic attack. Like he didn't know what to do with it, with that back and forth energy, because it was so at that point, insane. Yeah, but no, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that this all started with your dad leaving a CD against your door, and it was a relationship that was, I mean, there was just a canyon of a divide between you and your dad, and it had so little to do with you not wanting a relationship with him or him not wanting a relationship with you. It's just, it seemed on the surface like this incompatibility until that moment. And on so many levels, and you're going to probably hate me for saying this, but on so many levels, this film to me seems far less about the Sonics. And on so many levels, the most compelling part about it is you. And there's, in many respects, it almost feels like a letter to your father. And I think that's what's so compelling. And I think that every time you described, the ways that other folks contributed to it, the magnetic pull, and what was compelling to them was, you got to put you and your dad in this film. And I think that it was that story that, the Sonics were the bedrock for that story to be told. And that's the humanity in the film. And there's this beautiful like interweb of music, and how that ultimately kind of became, I don't want to call it the lifeline, but it became the vein by which like this transfusion of connection between you and your father emerged. And it's amazing that you guys got to see this band live together. I mean, I don't know. I think you captured you when you reflect back, and it's like, why are you doing this movie? It's like, you had to make this film. You know what I mean? And there was a part of you that knew you had to make the film. You weren't maybe even self-aware of why you needed to do it, but you had to do it because it defines so much of who you are and what you come from and what you stand for, and everything you've been working towards. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't move to LA, I would venture, because you wanted to be famous and do a bunch of coke and make music videos, or be the next David Fincher. You wanted to tell stories, and you wanted to make people feel something the way you did when you were 4 years old watching E.T. And by the end of this, there's people that are going to be sobbing watching your film the same way you were as a 4-year-old watching that film. And for whatever it's worth, you came full circle. And I hope you feel a real sense of fulfillment and reward from that, because you made it in ways that people make, there are folks making millions of dollars, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, are never going to make it in LA. And you did that. And I hope you see that one day.
No, yeah, I mean, thank you. I really appreciate everything you just said. I think I'm still kind of in it, and one thing, the story of my dad and I being in the film, and having him pass away and get sick. And so now, when I watched the film, because that part of it had already been in the movie when he got sick. And so my dad did get a chance to see the movie, and he went to all the film festivals and loved it. But now it's like, when I watch the film, it's like this, there's this shot of my dad in the movie backstage at the Moore. It's like really quick. You wouldn't know unless you knew my father. And he's like standing next to Chris Novoselic, and he's just like, doesn't give a fuck. He's looking for the Sonics. And I don't know, man, every time I watch the movie, I get to that part, and it's like, and it's right at like the emotional crescendo where all these other things are with Buck and everything's kind of going on. And I don't know, what I'm getting at is I'm so fucking glad that I did this, because now I have this way to remember my father. And as a dad now myself, it's hopefully like a gift to my kids, and they could see their grandfather in this cool way, and also a gift to the Sonics, because that's been a big part of this movie, is having them see this movie and see how, because it hit them all really hard, and their family members like really hard, and I mean, I know it brought a lot of them together that maybe weren't talking, and yeah, I'm still swimming in all that, I guess. So I don't have enough distance from it to really know exactly where to put all that. But thanks for saying all that.
So then the question is, when can the masses find a way to experience what we experienced?
Well, the movie's playing in select theaters right now, and it's going to be released in theaters around Europe soon. I don't have any dates or specifics yet, because all that stuff's kind of still being worked out. But there is going to be a digital and a Blu-ray and DVD release early 2025. So it'll be, available for sale, and then I'm assuming it'll end up on a streamer and all that. All the news of all of that, I'm not, because people are, dude, I can't tell you how many like hate messages I get on Facebook. They're like, why aren't you releasing this on Amazon? I'm like, dude, I'm not holding back any information. I promise you. Like the moment I know when it's going to be released digitally, I will share that on Facebook and Instagram and all that. But it's going to be early 2025. And we're also working on a vinyl only soundtrack release.
Oh,
which I'm excited
nice.
about.
Very cool.
Which won't just have Sonics. It's also got a lot of Whaler stuff on there. And yeah.
Is it kind of like the compilation that was circulating through London in the 80s? Just all the great stuff.
I kind of love
that.
No,
I'm saying for this, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like a compilation of all the good stuff that
I can see the guys in Seattle covering a bunch of Sonic songs, man.
They have. There's already an album. It's like Mark Arm and a bunch of guys covered a bunch of Sonic stuff. And it's funny because I've had guys reach out to me from some pretty big bands since this movie's come out, and they're like, "What do you think if we do this again?" I'm like, "Dude, whatever." Like I love it. Like I love that. I love that. Like a whole new generation of people are getting a chance to see this film and hear this music. And I mean, there's so many screenings that I've gone to where you see these like kids getting dragged into the movie by their parents, and they're just like, fucking whatever, dad. And they're walking in just like, fucking stupid movie about some stupid fucking band. And then the end of it, they're coming up to me like, where do I find that shit? I'm like, come on, man. You know where to find everything. What are you asking me?
Spotify, search for the time. There it is. Plus button.
Yeah, you've probably got like 5 new apps that I've never heard of that you're listening to music. Like, it's probably all on there. I don't know. But that's one thing that's been really cool, is to see that, and it's like, Buck throughout those years, it's really trying to just keep that flame burning, and Buck's not with us anymore, and I hope that this film helps to kind of contribute to that burn and keep fanning those flames.
He passed the torch to you. You may not have realized at the time when you were at your lowest point in Bozeman, but it was there, and then Ashley walked in the door, and it.
Yeah, man.
And here we are. You still have it.
Yeah.
You still have it. Now maybe you'll get to pass it to your kids when you take them to concerts. Have you taken your kids to concerts yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, there you go. You'll pass on the music.
Yeah. No, but they're listening to music. I mean, they love music. Good. I mean, they love the Sonics. They love Slayer. Like, I don't care. I play it all. I've got a ridiculous, record collection in my living room. It's about to break a hole through my floor, I'm sure, in this house that we live in. But
raise them right, Jordan.
Yeah, man. Whatever they want to listen, I do not care. It can be the hardest, gnarliest stuff, or if they want to listen to, Tommy James and the Shandels, like let's rock that right now. Like whatever. Let's do it. Dolly Parton all day, baby. Let's do it. Like my kids
love it.
They love music, and yeah. Well, my son Jack really likes Pearl Jam, by the way.
Good. Jack's got great taste.
Yeah. When Dark Matter, when the book came out, he wanted to listen to that song on repeat over and over and over again. And when I was like, I'm cool with this. We can do this.
My oldest son too. Every day going to school. Don't matter.
Yeah.
Good take it.
Oh, he loved it. Yeah.
Oh, dude, this has been awesome, and I'm so glad I got a chance to watch the film because it's great, and now I'm a Sonics fan too. And everybody out there if you've not seen the film yet, it's coming to someplace, somewhere near you, maybe even your device in early 25. So Jordan Albertsen, Sonics, boom. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, Jordan.
Big thank you again to Jordan Albertsen for spending the time talking Sonics, talking life, talking relationships, music. Yeah. It's the binder, Paul.
It is. It's the tie that binds. The tie that binds.
I'm stoked for all of you out there who have not had a chance to watch this film yet. Get that chance early next year, 2025, where it'll be in more theaters. It'll be available to purchase online. It'll be able to be streamed. As soon as we know, from Jordan's mouth to our inboxes, that's not how email works, from Jordan's fingers to our inboxes, and then we tell you. But you'll probably hear it from somewhere else as well. Then you'll know. But it was super great to get to chat with him about his process and the stories behind the stories that he documented.
It's a human story, and it's amazing to think that that Mike played such an important, Mike and Ashley played such important roles in this story coming to life. And that story within the story is so incredibly compelling, and as is everything that Jordan shared with us on this episode. So I could not be more grateful for the opportunity to have chatted with him. And for those of you listening, this one's worth watching.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, we appreciate you for being here. If you want to support our fundraiser for December, go ahead and scan the QR code on your screen right now, or tap on the link in our Instagram bio. There's links pretty much everywhere. It is a way to support kids who are less fortunate than ours, and every kid deserves a fabulous Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever. And this is one way we can do that. Toys for Tots is a fabulous organization. So send them some of your money. And if you send them $5 or more, you will receive a little thank you from us, a couple of stickers and a pin, just to say thank you for doing that. And listen, the greatest donator, the biggest donation, Eddie Vedder Mystery Pack. We're celebrating.
Parker Lewis can't lose with that one, my friend.
How many people do you think know your Parker Lewis references?
Maybe 5.
There's one guy in Minnesota who's like, yeah,
Jordan Albertsen knows my Parker Lewis references.
Wouldn't that be great synergy? Yeah. Eddie Vedder Mystery Pack. How fun is that? If you want to support the show, you can do so with Patreon. We've got a great sub community over there, Discord server, extra content, and monthly giveaways. This monthly giveaway, the giveaway this month, the Old Record Store Day 12-inch featuring Waiting for Stevie and Wreckage live. And we'll give you a slip mat too, a little dark matter slip mat. We also have an online shop now, guys. So easy access to support the show and help us to reinvest in you, reinvest in the content that you guys all love. So get yourself a mug, get yourself a t-shirt, a hoodie, whatever it is, to say thank you. And we will then, what do they call it? They call it paying it forward. We will then pay it back to you in the kind of good content, as they say. So there you go. It's the month of giving. It's December, right?
Yeah, exactly. 'Tis the season, Jason.
'Tis the season. If you go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, that would be super. Bell for notifications so you know exactly when these videos come out. But if you are audio only, old school, Paul, what should they be doing?
Yeah, they should feed that algorithm, rate, review, subscribe on your preferred podcast platform of choice. Keep it fed. Keep it satiated. Keep it full.
Okay.
Like Santa's bag of goodies, just stuff it with your rates, your reviews.
I was waiting for the Santa reference. I was like, is it coming?
Yeah,
is it coming?
Yeah, it was coming.
We will see you all next week for the last episode of this calendar year. I think we might have more Christmas things in this room and on us.
Something holiday-esque.
So if you like the holidays, next week is going to be, I'm telling you right now, there's going to be spiked eggnog on my desk. I'm telling you right now, that'll be happening. So come join us. It'll be a lot of fun.
It will.
Thank you for watching, everybody, or thank you for listening. And until next week's holiday-themed episode, you have been listening to or watching
The State of Love and Trust.